Um, I mean, I have to tell Jodi that I honestly haven't read a book in about 5 years. And this was for 5 or 6 years because of certain things I haven't been able to do. But this one is amazing. It was such a great read. It helped me. It has so many different aspects to it that are so critical right now. Your timing could not have been more perfect in writing this book. Oh my God. I know you didn't just write it. You wrote it probably 2 years ago, but the fact that it has come out now and oh, it's just wonderful. So I am really pleased to welcome Jodi Aman. She is the author of this new book I'm talking about called Anxiety, I Am So Done With You. This is the book. I'm going to hold it up several times because I'm so excited about it. Thank you, Jodi, and welcome. These are my little sunshine stickies that are in here as I've read the book over and over again. I'm going to just do a few housekeeping items and then we'll get rolling. This is a live Zoom meeting and we're kind of doing it Brady Bunch style. Hopefully you guys have all noticed that this is not done webinar style. So we can kind of introduce Jodi to our My Friend Abby community. We're really happy about that. And we're going to be able to stay connected. And this is a really important topic. So keep your video on if you'd like. I do ask that everybody definitely stays muted so that Jodi and I can go back and forth. And then we're going to do a live Q&A, a segment a little bit later on. And then we will ask you to unmute and jump on your video and show your beautiful selves. And if you're a little shy, then that's okay too. But we really do hope that you can jump in and participate. The Get Real conversation is being recorded and will also be shown on community television. So welcome Trumbull Community Television. We're happy to have them here and spread the word and talk about mental health and wellness. We hope that everybody is comfortable and we're really going to dig in here. We also want to thank Trumbull's Prevention Partnership. My Friend Abby is so proud to be collaborating with them and keeping mental health and wellness really in the forefront. We've done several things together and they are amazing. They are amazing. So thank you so much for that sponsorship. We really do appreciate it. I'm going to just mention who we are as an organization. So My Friend Abby's mission is to empower youth and young adults to actively create peer-to-peer connections through grants that improve mental and emotional health. So we are looking for youth and young adults and teens who are willing to take action and do something and speak up and speak out about mental health, why it's so important to talk about our mental health, why it's so important to talk about mental illnesses, and also, of course, suicide prevention. So here we are. Again, I am going to welcome Jodi. And Jodi, excuse me, I have my notes here. My computer gave me a little problem today. I'm going to do a really quick introduction. You are a psychotherapist, a writer, a TEDx speaker, a mom. I know you have several other titles. You are amazing. We are so honored to have you here this evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Gillian. It's so nice to be here. I'm so happy to be live with people. I record a lot of videos and I have to imagine what people are asking and thinking. And now I get to do it with everybody here. So I'm excited for the question and answer time.
Yeah, that's always the best part, right? It's because you really know that people are paying attention and, you know, it's an important subject to them. And oh my gosh, you couldn't have picked a better time to write this book. It is such an important topic. You are the epitome of what we say here at My Friend Abby. It's a long story, but number 37, helping others in a big way. It was on Abby's aspirational list before she died. And we use that as a tagline, helping others in a big way. And number 38 is live a happy life. And I know there's a lot going on in between those. And I want to talk about that too at some point. Sure. But this amazing book right here, it is really important because it deconstructs the power of anxiety and the hold that it has on so many of us. I've learned so much about, mental health and wellness in the last 6 years, and it explains the physiology of anxiety and kind of mentally and biologically, but it's very thoughtfully done and it's in very simple terms. Thank you so much for us layman people. And then it shows us how to bring in new skills and build on them and, create our own peace and happiness. I absolutely love this book. So thank you. Thank you, Jodi.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm going to get
into
it and ask you your first question. How do you explain what anxiety actually feels like? So, for example, how does a teen explain what anxiety feels like to a parent?
Well, it's hard to have the words a lot of the times for these feelings, right? They feel different at different times. They kind of change rapidly. And, we're so busy wondering why and wondering and really scared about it that it takes attention, actually. It takes our focus to be able to describe the sensations in our body, because it's competing with what's going on in our head and the fear and everything about it. So I think that what traps people a little bit is teens feel like they can't tell somebody else how that they're feeling in there. They feel so crazy and they feel really worried about telling somebody how crazy that they feel. And they don't really know that a lot of people feel the same way. When you have that in your head, it's invisible. Everyone else, a lot of people feel these ways. So many people feel these ways, but it's so invisible. And so these teenagers think they're the only ones that are, quote, crazy, and they're not. Yeah. And so, they feel those physical sensations, like that they either get really hot or really cold, feel stomach cramps or stomach aches. They feel like energy under their skin. They might have tunnel vision, really focused and hooked on some thoughts. All of these are from the adrenaline that's going through their blood. All of the symptoms of anxiety are symptoms of extra adrenaline in our blood. And there's a purpose to all of them, to get us to act in case we're in physical danger. We already know that. But when you don't realize, they seem so weird. Sometimes like your leg gets numb, or you feel like you're disconnected with reality. And those kind of symptoms really freak somebody out, but they are exactly what adrenaline does. Adrenaline tries to clear your mind and make it blank so you could really focus on survival in that moment if you were in danger. And so people think, my mind's blank. It really upsets them and freaks them out, but it's actually just the hormone doing that. And it's not something you have to worry about. There's so much mystery. I think that's what gives anxiety so much power, is there's so much mystery around our feelings. And if they told somebody, like if teens told their parents or told adults, and adults says, yes, that's adrenaline. This is why the adrenaline does that. It's not a mystery. It's not freaky. It's not bizarro. It's exactly what our biology does. It would settle a lot of people down, wouldn't it?
And, I wish there was a class. I wish there was a class like this that explained exactly that to our youth and our young adults, because, that discussion is so critical. You need to know what's going on with the changes in your body. I know there's health class, but this is, again, mental and emotional health is just something that we're just now starting to open up and talk about it. One of the words that I really feel is so important to talk about is the word shame. I think it's important to talk about shame. I think being open is going to really help us to limit the power of shame. Also, the other words that come to mind are mental illness and suicide. So these are things that I know people are ashamed of. And, when I see a young kid say, I have a mental illness, I'm so proud of them, because that's exactly what it is. It's something with the brain. And, it's not something to be ashamed of.
Right. Except for, there's discourses around the word the concept of mental illness that changes depending on the person. So when someone is empowered and says, I have a mental illness and I understand it and I know how to work around it, and it makes me tougher because, man, it's harder to live with this and I do a good job, right? That would be an empowered way to talk about having a mental illness.
Yeah.
But sometimes people talk about it when they think about it in a different way, and then we'll talk about a mental illness as something they might feel trapped in or feel out of control over, or like that they have to have this forever and they can't get out of it or they can't change it. So there's a little bit of hopelessness in that, possibly. So it depends on what a person thinks. Like, these words have different meaning to different people. But we as parents or as educators or as counselors, I don't know how you're working with teens, we have influence about how they think about those words. And so that's really important. We want to, they could express the words that describes their feelings and what they're experiencing, and then we just understand from their point of view what they're trying to say with those words, instead of giving them words to say. You know, some kids say I feel uncomfortable. They don't use the word anxiety. Some kids say embarrassed or shy or introvert, that they use different words. I'm not saying all introverted people are anxious, but there is a lot of anxiety there, right? And so we use different words. We use stress or overwhelm, and it's the same animal as anxiety. And actually even shame is too, right? So when you talk to people who have problems in their life, like circumstances and experiences that have been really difficult, and you're unpacking those experiences. And when I say unpacking, it means like taking off all of those stories that we tell ourselves about our experiences that we've had.
Yeah.
And when we unpack all that and try to get what's under there, like what bothers them about that, what bothers them about that, really trying to like open it up, because it's kind of closed. We pile stuff on to our problems, you know, negative self-judgments, we pile on worries. And when all that's piled on, it just gets so much bigger. And so we unpack it, we're taking all the things off. Underneath all of it is a fear. And the very basic fear that we have is fear that we're unworthy, right? So fear that we're not enough. So that's really shame and guilt, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the basis of all our problems is shame and fear, guilt. It's almost like I could interchange those words there, because the very basic is like, I'm afraid I'm unworthy. That's the source of all of our problems.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And, you know, it's hard for a young adult, especially, you know, or a young child, to articulate those feelings. And then, like you said, to actually understand where they're coming from. And I think that's really important. I think understanding that, well, one of the things that you say that I really love, and I just want to tell you that our audience consists of teens, of young adults, and of parents. So this is a discussion really for everyone. But I love it when you say that teens and young adults do have coping skills. I love that, because you said a lot of parents will come to you and say, help my child learn coping skills. You want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, we have so many skills. We just don't see it. I was talking to the head of psychiatry on the biggest mental health agency in the country in Rochester. You know, the University of Rochester has the biggest mental health agency in the entire country. And I was talking to the director, and we were agreeing that these kids are struggling the more than any other time in history, but they actually have it the easiest. So they're struggling and suffering so much because they don't know they can, right? They have the skills. I mean, we've had 2 million years of our brain evolving to be highly adaptable. So these kids are highly adaptable, and it shows up all in their life, except for we invisibilize it. We can talk about that, but it shows up. They're able, if they couldn't get to the age they are, if they didn't have some skills. So they have skills. It's just that our culture and everything and our shame invisibilizes our skills. And then they think that they can't have any. They don't have any. They think they can't handle anything. They think that they can't do anything. They have no faith and no trust in themselves. And that's why anxiety is so rampant. And that's why depression is so rampant, is they just don't see it. And so it's our job as educators and parents and counselors to show them the skills that they have, like actually specifically point them out, notice their unique skills, tell stories about their unique skills, how they're different than other people, so they learn, and you're modeling for them to notice them themselves. Because like shame, there's so much shame in our culture. We're uncultured to have shame, because we have these expectations that we have to live up to. And these expectations that we have in our culture are completely irrational, unreasonable, unrealistic, right? To be too thin, you have to be perfectly thin and beautiful and cool and young and, and whatever, perfect, sexy and everything, right? You have to be popular and smart and rich. And they're all unreachable. And so we constantly are feeling that we're inadequate. So we're constantly feeling like we're failing at everything. And that's why we have so much shame. And so it's just important for them to understand, like, it's from our culture, because kids and adults, a lot of times I talk about what kids are feeling, and it's really what we're feeling too. They might have it a little more intensely because they feel everything more intensely, but we could relate to it because it's like, oh yeah, I feel that too, right? It's like, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. So, we think that the shame is something that we have and nobody else has. And it makes us feel even more shamed, right? And more worried that something's wrong with us. And so it doubles down and it spirals. But really, it's something, these shabby self-esteems is something that comes from our culture, the Western culture, the individualistic culture. Yeah. And if they understood that, they could probably relieve some of the negative self-judgment that they have.
Oh yeah. I mean, I just see so many kids doing that. And what's so ironic is that, when you're dealing with depression and anxiety or bipolarity, whatever it may be, it starts to eat away at you and tell you that you're a bad person and tell you that, that you're no good and that you're different. And yeah, and that's when that person needs to be just surrounded by people and have that right person to speak with and understand what they're going through. And
so you belong, we get you. We definitely understand. We felt that way too. We get you. And unfortunately, between kids and parents, a lot of times the kids are like, you don't understand, you don't understand, you don't understand. And after a while of hearing that, the parents, first of all, the parents are in self-blame, who spirals too, of course. And so the parents are worried and they're blaming themselves. And so when the kids say, you don't understand, the parents are like, well, maybe I don't understand. Maybe it's really worse than I'm thinking. And, so they add to that story. Like, we're kind of creating the story that nobody understands. When you feel bad and you isolate yourself, it's a story you do tell about yourself that nobody understands. It's not really true. People understand because we're all living in this culture and we all have shabby self-esteems. So your parents do understand, but the more they say that, then the parents who have a shabby self-esteem themselves, because we're human, think that they don't understand, and it creates a rift. And we don't need a rift. We need to come together. We need to have each other's back. We need to support each other. We need to say, I get you, I understand you. This is what we all want, this validation. When you're hurt, you're devalued. And so the response and the healing for all of us is to be given value, worth, right? The biggest problem we have is the fear that we're unworthy. And so being treated as we're worthy, we belong, we matter, that's what heals us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing that we say quite a bit is you matter. And listen, parenting is not easy. Being a kid is not easy these days. There's people are distracted, they're working, you can't be with your child 24/7. And with everything else that's going on in the world. I want to talk to you a little bit about controlling your thoughts and actions. COVID is making us feel so out of control. I mean, we're all sick of it, right? We've all been dealing with it since March. And that fear of the unknown, that powerless feeling, that worthlessness feeling, how do you turn those negative thoughts, that self-judgment that you mentioned earlier, into kind of a mental resiliency, self-compassion? Again, we're looking for peace and we're looking for happiness. Anxiety can just beat you up. And again, that's why this book is so helpful for everyone. I highly recommend it because it really does help you understand what you're going through biologically, and it's your brain, and there's so many great ways that you can kind of turn that around by reading your book. So yeah, how do you turn those negative thoughts into more like self-compassion and mental resiliency?
Well, self-compassion is the answer, actually. So we're not turning into self-compassion. Self-compassion is the cure, because the negative thoughts about ourselves is all based on this negative self-judgments from that cultural thing that we're talking about, the shame or inadequacies that we're feeling all the time. So we have these negative self-judgments. Now, the negative self-judgments attach us to feelings. So when we have a feeling like loss or sadness, and then we judge that or worry about that, like, what's wrong? I'm overreacting, or this is weird, why everyone could do this but me. All of those negative self-judgments that we have attaches to that sadness or that deep sense of loss even more. It grows it and it pulls it more strongly into your heart, so you suffer more. And if we had a feeling like loss and we're sad about this loss, and we said, oh, I totally understand. I feel that bad. I totally get it. Okay, so there's a self-validation that you're doing. We love to do it to from the parents to the kids. We want to give validation, but also we want to train ourselves and our kids to be able to do it for ourselves too, because immediately, this is what happens. We have a negative thought, and then we have the judgment and the worry about it, and we think the whole thing is the feeling. We forget that the original feeling is this appropriate feeling to the response of the situation, right? We're human. Someone hurts us, we feel sad. Then we think we're overreacting. We worry about, am I ever going to get better? Am anyone going to love me? What did I do wrong? All of those self-judgments and all of those worries are like exponentially growing the intensity of the emotion. So if we have that normal human response to a situation, a difficult situation, and that sadness, then we say, I understand. I totally get why I feel that way. Of course, people would feel that way. Mm-hmm. Immediately, we don't attach the feeling. We feel it, but it's so much less. All of these worries and stuff is trying to escape that feeling of loss. But the feeling, and then we suffer so much. So we're trying to control this feeling of loss, and we're creating more chaos, which is worse. But we're so afraid to feel the original feeling of loss, which is so much less than we're actually feeling, so that's the funny part. So if we said, oh, I totally understand, then we don't attach to it. We feel it, but it dissipates really quickly. It's got nothing to hold on to, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And it goes away. So self-compassion is actually the key to all of it, because it's validation. The biggest problem is feeling devalued or worthless. And so all of the solution is feeling valued and worthy. If you think about it that way, it's easy to simplify it a little bit. And there was something else that you were talking about. There was two parts of that question. One was, how do we get rid of the negative thoughts, and the compassion. Then you said something else at the end. I can't remember now.
Right. Controlling your thoughts and actions. But yeah, the mental resiliency.
Oh, mental resiliency. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So we always have limits in our life, right? We're human. So we're just not superhuman. And so there's always limits in our life. Maybe we can't fly. We can't run, 300 miles in an hour. We can't, there's some limits that we have to life, and we adjust to those limits within them. And then when we have more limits, sometimes, it kind of shocks us a little bit, but we could look at our limits, which is what the anxiety wants us to do. We could look at the limits that we have in our life, or we could look at our choices within them. So anxiety always wants us to look at what's out of our control, but there's infinite number of things that actually are in our control. But these become invisible when the anxiety is like a beacon for your attention, constantly in your head, saying, look at me, this is bad, this is horrible, how do you get to do this? Anxiety is like so convincing that something's wrong, and you have to know it, you have to figure it out. And so if you were to start to really try to pay attention to all of your choices within the restrictions, then you become empowered problem solvers. So we're all adaptable. We're all problem solvers. This is 2 million years of hunter and gatherer times. Our brain has evolved to solve problems. And when we don't have a problem, actually our brain starts to look for a problem, and that's why we spiral in negativity. Now we have these limits, and we could spiral in trying to solve the limits. But what if we tried to solve what choices that we have and opened ourselves up? And what happens when you open yourself up to the choices you have, you actually see even more choices you didn't even know before. And so it's really powerful. And so I'm trying to transfer people to feeling out of control to that's an identity they have, right? I'm out of control. I'm a mess. I'm anxious, whatever. And I want to transfer their identity to be empowered problem solvers. So I teach parents and educators how to train their kids to be empowered problem solvers. I still work with families and young people individually as well. So you could, if you're like, I need to talk to her, I still work with people. But yeah, so that's hopefully that answers your question. When you're an empowered problem solver, you're resilient. You could see your power in a situation instead of feeling disempowered all the time.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating, and it's also, you know, I have seen people get stuck in that spiral. Just, you know, it's almost like, is there a comfort level almost in that? Like, well, this is where I'm at. I'm never going to be able to move forward. So, you know, it could be a fear of success or a fear of failure. I've seen so many people do that. And again, you know, what you see is so different than what that person is feeling and saying. And that's where I think, you know, again, sometimes there's rifts with parents and kids, like, you know, yeah, but look at you know, look at how much you've accomplished already. You know, you could be anything you want, you know, and that just makes a person, you know, feel like crap.
What I would suggest is trying to say something specific, you know, trying to give those specific examples. That helps, because their anxiety is rejecting what you're saying. If you're like, but you're awesome, it's so general, and their anxiety is going to be like, no, you have to say that, you're my mother. Who gets that? So, you know, they're like, you have to say that. Or my kids are like, stop therapizing me. So you know, but if you're specific, you're like, oh, remember that time you had that idea and nobody else thought of that, but you thought of that and really helped us out of that jam. Like really specific stories. Remember that time you didn't want to climb up there, but you know, you were scared, but you were so determined to do it and you did it. Remember that time you shared your lunch with somebody that was so kind? Or remember that time you stuck with that friend when everybody else, you know, left that person out and you stuck with them? There's always specific stories. I say the person's name, everything, you know, so that's I think what I would say. If you say you're awesome, you do tons of stuff, give them the examples. That'll really help. Their anxiety can't really protest. They might be like, well, you know, they have nothing to say. That really happened, you know, and they're taking it in. And even if they're fighting you back, they're taking it in. They need you to reassure them, and they'll protest that, and they'll say it doesn't work, and they're actually learning it. I know this because, you know, my older one is my middle kid, really, because I have a stepson. He's 20. And, you know, you repeat over and over these skills or help them out, and then reject them. And then when his sister got to the age and she had some worries, he would tell her what to do. And they're the things that I had told him. Oh. They land. And I like to tell parents this because they never get this feedback. They never get this positive feedback. But I interview kids all the time about when they're upset. And the parents have told me that there's huge fights when they're upset, when they're anxious and upset, and there's huge fights. And the parents are like, I don't even know what to do. Like, they don't listen to me. And when I interview the kid about that upset, they admit that the parents are doing the right thing that's helpful. Even though in the moment they're rejecting it, they want the parents to keep doing that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, you don't have that conversation when they're upset. You have that conversation later when they're not upset, then they could reflect back on it and say, that was actually really helpful. I know I was a jerk, but that was really helpful. over, and this 20 years, over and over and over again, kids say this about their parents. So I want you to know that you are making a difference. It is landing, and you might not know it for a long time, but it is working. You know, we think it doesn't work if they still are upset. It does work.
It does work. Yay. Something positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think right now mental health issues are totally exacerbated. Today, they say that 85% of people right now are suffering from some form of anxiety and, of course, isolation. You know, our mission at My Friend Abby is to get kids to talk to each other, you know, peer-to-peer connections. It's so critical. And I'm looking through the end of the year saying we need to give out more grants to young adults who are going to you know, be able to help spread the word that, you know, even though you might be in isolation and your plan went out the window, you're not going to college like you thought you were going to, or, you know, your school's going to be run so very differently. What can we do with ourselves to still grow and mature and be creative? You know, there are a lot of things that can be done, and that's why when I formed this organization, I know the kids are so creative. I know the kids are talking about mental health, you know, more than ever. Sometimes I hear kids say, yeah, I keep trying to tell my parents that I'm dealing with depression, and they're like, oh, you're being a drama queen. You know, I've heard that over and over again too. So I think the world has definitely changed in the last 6 years that I've been involved in mental health. So I guess what are some practical tips maybe that you could give for kids
So
and
there's
adults?
5 things I talk about what to do during coronavirus so that you still keep your vitality and still continue to build your resiliency. And in fact, if you do these things, you'd actually come out of this better than we went into it, because we are all kind of reeling before we even went in, because, you know, anxiety was growing, depression was growing, suicidality is growing, especially among young people. And so what if we took this time to build our resilience and we're better after? We can actually, there is opportunity to do that. So the 5 things I talk about to bring online, you mentioned some of them actually. One is routine. So routine is really out the window. Teens are staying up all night and sleeping all day. It's not good for isolation when they're doing that. You know, you want them to be going to bed the same time, waking up at the same time, so they're in the world when other people are around. Because isolation tends to make people go downhill pretty quickly. So having a routine, because it also settles the mind. If the whole day's not routine, and you don't know what you're doing and everything's kind of all over the place, the mind's trying to catch up. So there's a bit of clutter in there as it is when you don't have a routine. And I'm not saying it doesn't have to be exact. It could be really big blocks, and they could be very flexible, but going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, working out at the same time, eating at the same time, work and play, those kind of things are important to have a bit of a routine, because we lost that. And then having some sense of novelty. So, you know, our brain needs a bit of novelty. If it doesn't have novelty, it's going to make up problems. And so we need some novelty to stimulate us and learn something and get something. So if you can with your family somehow, and I know we're 6 months into this because like we've gone to all the parks. Yeah. So sometimes there's more parks. And then sometimes you could challenge yourself to do something different, you know, even if it's like building something or creating something or changing a room to be something else, cleaning something out, some kind of novelty, getting a new kind of craft for that weekend, something like tie knots and string and make cool necklaces like macrame. There's so many things that you could do. Paint a mural on your shed. My kids are painting a mural on our shed. So there's so many things. I told my daughter, why don't you get people to do a talent show outside, socially distanced, raise money for a charity. There's stuff to do, you know, you have to do it quick, and we're in New York, so it's going to get cold soon. So we have to do that quick if she's going to do it. So there's tons of things that we could do. A lot of kids are starting podcasts. I mean, people are doing all kinds of really interesting stuff during this time. And so novelty. So routine, novelty, something creative. course, we're overlapping because a lot of the examples I've given about novelty is being creative. We need to stimulate that prefrontal cortex. The creativity is going to solve our brains need to problem solve. And if we do something creative, then we're going to use up the energy of the brain to problem solve. We're going to highly develop the prefrontal cortex, and anxiety and depression are going to go down. We need to have creativity. Of course, movement's got to be on the list of 5, right? Yeah. Having some kind of movement. I love that kids are being outside a little bit more than they were before. So that's a great bonus of this time. Even in the winter, people could go outside. We walk all through the winter, freezing cold New York winter. And so walking, getting them movement somehow, some kind of routine exercise. When we were shelter in place, we actually had 4 of us, and everyone took a day of the week to create so 4 times a week we exercised, and we had about a half hour, and then my son planned it, my daughter planned it, I planned it, my partner planned it. And so we had 4 days a week that we had exercise. And once we started to open up a little bit, that kind of got moved aside. And then the last one, let me see, sense of purpose. So the last one, you gotta, you're saying all the right stuff. These are the things we know from research we need. Kids need to feel like they matter. Like there's a point to their day. That, if they're bored and they have nothing, then those anxious, negative thoughts are going to come in. And they feel untethered. They feel no sense of belonging without a purpose. We don't feel good. Our soul wants a purpose, and we don't feel good. We feel sick to the soul, but that comes into our mentality, our emotions, and our body when we don't feel good, when we don't have a purpose. So those 5 things, I think if we have those 5 things, we're okay. And it seems that they don't even seem that radical, do they? They seem very simple and not that radical. And anyone could do them within the restrictions. We could do them.
Yeah, no, that is amazing advice. And again, yes, it seems simple, and you can take baby steps with these things. You don't have to, again, I want to go to this. So number 37 in our organization is help others in a big way. And number 38 is live a happy life. So help others in a big way is just so important, because volunteering is important. And again, one of my friends always says, I can't get out of my own way, but when you volunteer, you're exposing yourself to a whole new world. And then number 38, live a happy life. I know I have to be so careful with that. And again, these were Abby's aspirations. And I know a lot of kids follow it when they're in a good place. But you can't say to somebody, just live a happy life. Come on, get over that anxiety. So I know there's a fine line there.
You have to give them practical skills, right? You have to make it practical, all of it, even letting go. It's so esoteric. It's like, let go. I'm like, oh, I'll tell you exactly how. Like, they need to know exactly how. We don't get how to have self-compassion. People ask me all the time when I'm doing therapy with them, they're like, how do you have self-compassion? Why don't we teach this in middle school? We should teach people how to have self-compassion from the get-go. It would solve so many problems in our life.
It really would. It's so sad. And I think it goes back to society, as you were talking about, and, all of the pressures that are not only, put on society in general, but we end up putting on ourselves, because that's the world, that we live in now. I want to mention that in your book, at the end of the book, there is a resource guide in the back of the book for parents, which is really, really helpful in understanding. Yeah, I'm gonna hold it up too, because I absolutely love it.
I love your Post-its in there. I gotta take a screenshot of that, or send me a picture of you with your Post-its.
I will. Yep. They definitely match, and that's our theme is sunshine, and we like to say that we are sending sunshine. That's
great.
Our campaign.
You are.
That's really important.
I actually have like a dotted line and a scissor. And in the first page of the book, I tell the kids, because I understand a lot of them feel like their parents don't understand. Exactly. And so I address that right away. Like, if you feel like the adults in your life don't understand, I've got you covered. I have a parents resource section in the back of the book. Cut those pages out, staple them together, and let your adult read them while you go through the book. So I really try to get the parents involved, get the kids to know that I'm going to take care of that piece, because it is a big piece for them, feeling misunderstood. and feeling like, how do I tell them? How do I explain it? I do have a lot of YouTube videos on this, like 5 things people with anxiety want you to know. I talk about it in the end of that book too. But yeah, so I think that's really important, bringing people together against the problem, because our problems try to get in the middle of relationships.
Yes.
And we can't
Bring
get
it
over
down.
our problems alone, right? We can't get over them alone. We need other people to get over our problems. And so we want to bring families together against the problem that's going on.
Yeah. So we're all human. We are built for connection. We're built for communication. And again, you see somebody spiraling because of anxiety and depression as beating them up. That's exactly when that person needs the help from someone, from an expert, from, a trusted person. So, whether we're talking about anxiety, depression, suicide. Suicide is a very big part of what we want to talk about, suicide prevention in our organization. So times are tough right now, but I think, again, your book is showing how you can learn a little bit about yourself in a very simple way, learn what anxiety does to you, and then there's building blocks of how to get out of your own way, how to get out of that whole spiral. And we shouldn't have to suffer with anxiety. We just shouldn't have to suffer, and so many people do.
Yeah, I think there's a message out there that, you just have this and you'll have it forever, and people believe that. I don't get it. If you have a mental health professional telling you that, then you would believe it, wouldn't you? It's not anyone's fault, really. There's a discourse in our culture of what anxiety is, and nobody really understands it. And so I'm trying to get the message out there to as many people as I possibly can.
Well,
So
Jodi,
this book, I think, helps.
unabashedly, I want you to sell more of these books, and I think you guys
Thank
should
you.
buy this book. It's awesome. It really is very helpful, and obviously it's helpful to our organization as well. I know a couple of people on here have the books, have read the books, said they learned so much, they cried, they get it. So that's really, really helpful. I want to, I guess at this point, we should open up for questions.
Sounds great.
Yeah, so please unmute yourselves, put yourself on video if you want. You don't have to.
If you need to write it in the chat, that's okay. But
okay.
make sure you give me enough information, but unmute yourself and come join us.
And you can raise your hand, right? Is there a way to raise your hand so that?
I'm not really sure. I'm not sure. If you type in the chat or you unmute, that would be great.
Type in the chat your name, and then I will call on you. So
come on, someone's got to be first.
There's got to be some great questions out there. This is really good stuff. So who wants to be first? Just even physically raise your hand if you're on video, and I'll ask you to unmute.
Look at all these people.
Yeah, we've got a great group. All right, we have Chris. She has a question. Go ahead, Chris.
Hi. I have a teenage son. He's 18. He's quite mature for his age, I think, in a lot of ways. But he has been experiencing some anxiety and depression over time, not just recently with COVID. I guess what I'm asking is, in your experience, obviously there are differences between girls and boys, teenagers. How do boys express themselves typically as compared to girls, and how do I sort of gauge, how serious his anxiety and depression is?
Yeah, sure. I'll answer that, Chris. Thank you so much for asking. It's hard to get really universal when we're talking about genders because there's a lot of differences. And when you're trying to assess for your kids, like how intense they're suffering and if what they need from you, I would ask directly. And I know that sometimes boys, sometimes girls, sometimes boys don't want to say, or they underestimate what's going on. And so you're trying to look for, I'm assuming that's what's happening. You did ask, and and he's not saying much, but you're worried.
Yeah,
Uh,
he has said, he has revealed it to me, but it's always when it's at the peak of the, you know, whatever the issue is.
Yeah, and maybe when he's not at the peak, he's not thinking about it at all, which is lovely.
Yeah.
A lot of times kids do that when they're anxious, they're anxious. When they're not, they're just not. And so
Yeah.
that might be different a little bit from adults in that way. But you, yeah, I guess when he says that or when he's calm, you might want to be like, well, how often does it about happen? Does it, you always tell me when it happens? Let's look at if it's too much. Do you feel like it holds you back in life? This is the thing. People ask me this all the time, is like, how do you know when you need help?
Yeah.
And it's like, you don't have to have like crossed a line into a disorder or anything. Help is out there. Anxiety is highly treatable no matter what level you have it. So if you feel like there's too much suffering, or you feel like you just don't want to go, you just want to continue to have even a little bit of that suffering, there is programs to take, videos to watch, people to consult, books to read, and
Yeah.
and it will help him get totally over it. Now, some people are like, it's not that bad and it's not bothering my life and I'll just keep it, I'll be okay. And other people, and some people say, well, I'm just going to have it forever. That's what I heard. I just have to manage it. Those people will keep their anxiety. And then there's some people who have anxiety like, nah, I'm not going to do this. It is so bad. I'm not living like this. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get better. And those people get better. It's about belief. If you believe that you get better, or if you believe that you have to stay like this, makes all of the difference. And so you could ask them, is it too much for you? Like, would you rather get some help for it? Number one, read a book. It's the easiest thing someone could do.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Who's that? I think Kate came on, but she went back away again. Anybody else? Kathy.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Hi, Jodi. Thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. It's funny you brought up, it's not really funny, but my son and I were just talking about self-compassion. We were playing tennis and he was doing really great and then got really frustrated with himself, and I could hear, kind of a little bit of talk, kind of negative talk, that kind of thing. But we did talk about self-compassion and, giving yourself a break. Could you give any more tips on, how parents can talk to their kids about self-compassion?
Yeah, just making it as visible as you can. It sounds like you did, when, I noticed you were saying that, and we all kind of say that stuff, that's, I like to take it out into the general. So when it's, it's really personal. It's like, I think that I'm frustrated because I didn't play it right, or I didn't hit it, and that frustration comes out and it feels really personal. And so sometimes it helps because you want to give somebody a distance from the chaos of the situation. So you're always trying to invite people to have a little bit of distance so that they could see. So there's 3 steps. And anyone has a difficult situation or struggling or going through a hard time, the 3 steps are, first, it's always validation. There's always self-compassion. So you would have compassion like, you're doing good, don't worry about it. Whatever kind of validating you want to do in the moment, doesn't matter. Some kind of valuing of him first, or some kind of valuing. Yeah, it's hard when I miss it too. I get really frustrated too. I could totally understand how you feel. So that validation's first. And then there's some kind of inviting a bit of a distance. And don't invite the distance until you've done the validating. Don't be like, it's no big deal, don't worry about it. Don't take it personally. All of those things come after they have validation and can have a bit of distance. If somebody's upset and people say, don't take it personally, they're upset and they're doing it wrong, right? So they double down on feeling bad about themselves. And so it's really important to get the validation first, because then they could release from the feelings. Like, it eliminates the attachment. And then, and only then, they could take a step back. And when they take a step back, they could look at, and so for that situation, I might be like, everyone feels that way. Like, take it out into the general. That would be the way I'd introduce him to take a step back and see it from like a bigger picture view. Yeah, I get really frustrated too. I think a lot of people are really frustrated when they can't do something really well. It sounds kind of funny because we don't have the situation exactly, but that might be a distance. Like, what would you, or what would you say if your friend said that to you? Or would you ever tell your best friend something like that? Would you ever talk that way to somebody else? Why would you talk that way to yourself if you would never talk that way to somebody else? So these are some examples of how you bring someone out into that distant view. And then the third step, then you realize what to do, right? The third step is then don't take it personally. It's like way later. That's like, people feel invalidated when you say that too early. So I don't know. I hope that's really helpful. I wanted it to be for that. Yeah, good. Okay. That situation and in a lot of other situations, these 3 steps really help. And I teach it in the book and in my courses all the time. I'm always teaching these 3 steps because we mistake it so much. We want to fix it.
Right.
And we forget the validation piece, but that piece is crucial. That compassion piece is number 1.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jodi. I do have a question that was sent to me, and then I would love to talk about that really quickly as well. Like, parents are always trying to fix things, right? It's always, based on your own experience. Well, when I broke up with my girlfriend, when I was a freshman in high school, it was fine. I got over it. You need to get over it. That's huge. That's like a huge kind of parenting experience. I think that we all need to kind of stop sometimes and just, again, follow your steps and how to handle that. Because you're not validating their feelings that way, right?
Right. Or you're changing the center of the conversation. So if your child's having some issue or whatever, and then they're talking and they want to be the center. If somebody is upset, they want to be the center. They want to have that TLC. They want that love. And so if you change the center, if you center yourself in the conversation and your past experience, it's off them. It's a conversation ender. Mm-hmm. Anytime I'm talking to a friend about a problem I have and then they start talking about themselves, I'm done. Mm-hmm. And it closes kids down. They stop talking. And, I'd rather have them keep talking, actually. And hopefully you do too. But some parents are like, I can't hear anymore. It's really bad. But, I'm into them I want them to tell me everything so that I could be the first one to see a red flag if there's going to be a red flag.
Right. Right.
And I always tell parents, like, keep up with what's going on with your kids' friends. So if they're talking mostly daily and you're updated on what the news is, then it's easier to update you. If they're not talking about it and then they have to come in and say and give you the whole background of something, they're not going to do it. And so, start having that consistent way for them to say, because then you're the first one in the know if something bad's happening.
Right. All right. That's great. We actually have 2 questions now. I'll leave the first one for last. This one is, do you have any tips of what to do when you're about to have an anxiety attack or during one? How to stop it?
Yes, Julietta, if you get my book, I talk about the biology of anxiety. And so when we understand the biology of anxiety and what's really happening in our brain, it gives us the way to, I don't have time to explain that all, but it gives us a way to stop the anxiety. And the way is, there's 2 steps to it, actually. And it's to not be afraid or not be bothered by it, because the amygdala sets off the adrenaline. And if you're scared of how you're feeling, and I know it's scary, I know that, and I address that, how to not be scared when it's really terrifying. But if you're not afraid of it, the amygdala doesn't keep triggering. We need to not be afraid. If you're afraid or you're bothered or you're judging or you're frustrated or you're angry, it keeps triggering the adrenaline. And so number 1, you have to try to figure out, and I really walk people through how to not be afraid. 1, I demystify it. And the second is take action. Because when you take some kind of action, you release the GABA hormone. The GABA hormone puts the brakes on the adrenaline. And so so while you're trying not to be afraid, it only takes a couple of minutes. If you're really not afraid, the adrenaline goes away really quickly. So you only have to kind of fake it until for briefly. And so if you say, oh yeah, there's adrenaline, okay, I'm going to just do this right now. Like, if you're not afraid of it and not attached to it, and then you take some kind of action, that movement is telling your brain we're fine, right? We're not helpless. Anxiety wants you to feel helpless. And if you feel like you could take some action and do something, whatever it is, anything, put ing on anything, and it's doing something, and verb. And then you're telling your brain, I'm good. I don't need to keep triggering anymore. And also you could tell your brain that it doesn't need to, that you're fine, that everything's safe, and you don't need that adrenaline anymore. So I'll add that third one in there for a bonus. Hope that helps.
I love that. That's awesome. And I love what you have a very specific definition. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it's basically,
I can think of it.
Anxiety is not the fear.
Yeah, anxiety is the leftover fear response when you're not in physical danger.
It makes so much sense. It really does. I think people need to kind of tell that to themselves over and over again and really drill down on that, because that is, it makes sense. Obviously it doesn't at the time, especially if you're having a panic attack. But when you have a calm moment, again, I think that's why this book is so good, because you can really reflect. You can read about what's going on, what's happening with your body, what anxiety is, and then you will have the tool to handle it next time. I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
Jodi, one more quick question, and this is a little bit more personal, but what actually prompted you to write this book?
Oh, well, I wrote my other book. This is my book for adults, but actually kids, this is published a couple of years ago, and actually kids over 13 read it, but I knew that I wanted to do something for teenagers specifically, after this came out, because I knew I have a lot of clients who are teens. And so, So I had a lot of clients that are teens, and I knew I wanted to speak directly to them. They had some specific things going on. And I think my TEDx talk prompted Skyhorse Publishing to come to me and said, would you put a book together for teenagers? And I said, I have a draft already, as I already knew that this needed to be birthed in the world, because I saw the decline in the emotional resiliency amongst teenagers, and I understood it. But if you watch my TEDx Wilmington talk, you'll see why I think the digital age is causing more and more problems, and it makes a lot of sense. It's in the book too, but if you want a gist of it, go see my TEDx Wilmington talk. People really love that too. So I started to see this increase, and I knew it was from the phone, and I really had to get this message out there. And that's why I wrote this book. My other book, I really talk about my own anxiety too, because I had anxiety for 2 decades when I was a teenager, and I cured myself totally of it. And so I've helped people in my practice for the next 20 years, solving their anxiety. And so I decided to do a YouTube channel, do a blog, really try to get that message out to more people than the 8 people I could work with a day.
Yeah, no wonder you can relate. Oh my goodness. So I kind of hate to use the word, but you have been on that journey, mm-hmm. and again, you're able to relate, which is just wonderful. And that was my last quick question was, social media now versus 5 years ago versus 10 years ago. What is the best advice that you have, especially to a young adult? I mean, it's so easy to say to the kids, get off your phone, get off social media. But, I guess, how do you find that balance? Is there a way to find that balance? And how do you know when it is spiraling out of control?
Yeah, I had a different answer before the coronavirus pandemic, because now that's all they have, right? So, I kind of backed off on that. We all really want them to have a little bit of a balance in their life, like getting outside, movement, in person, relating to people. But we have to, with this, they're on screens even more than ever. And some of that is necessary now for education and also for social situations, and maybe for creativity and purpose. They're going to be on their screens. And so we really have to kind of change the way we think about well-balanced, because some of the options that they do need for their resilience is going to be there, and their academic success or all this. So so if they have some movement, if they have some family time, if they have some kind of thing that they do that has a sense of a purpose, then that's okay. If they're bored in doing it and they have no schedule and they're doing it and they feel really bad about themselves and they're just on TikTok, then I'd be a little bit worried. if they're isolated and not with people, that's what I worry most. The most I worry about is isolation in terms of mental health. Isolation is the worst for the human psyche. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so when they're connecting, it's okay. When they're not, I'm worried.
Yeah, yeah, really, really, really great advice. Well, Jodi, thank you so much. I want to thank everybody in the My Friend Abby community who joined us this evening. And again, keep up the great work. You are amazing. And I can't tell you how much I really appreciate what you've done and for joining us. It's really nice that you took the time, and we're so happy to meet you.
Thanks, Gillian. I'm so happy to be here. And I'm here. My website's jodiema.com. I have so many blogs and videos on there for you.
Good stuff. All really, really good stuff. All right. Thanks all.